Getting quite good at that, timing that music. It's doing very well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Full Course Yellow in Pit Lane's Wednesday night get together. Just a bit of a chat. Going to be a fairly quick one tonight. We've got a smaller crew than usual. We'll be catching up with them in just a second. I don't know. So some of them are working, some of them are watching the cricket. Dave's probably out, running around a park somewhere and doing what Dave Stillwell does. And I'm not sure what Richard's up to, but we'll bring you up to date with what news has been around. Been fairly quiet on the motorsport scene, sort of especially locally. But we'll catch up with what's happening. There's been a bit of stuff happening overseas. The Watkins Glen 6 hour on the weekend was interesting. If you caught up with that at all, the Penske Porsche across the line first, but at this stage is not the winner. It was the BMW hybrid V8, which was given the victory later as a result of the Porsche failing a post-race tech inspection. So we might. The captain's been caught. He's been a naughty boy. But anyway, we'll sort that out. But joining us tonight on the program, we've got, as usual, we've got Pete Johnson joining us again. G'day, Pete. How are you?
Right, I'm all right. Brett, how are you?
Not bad, and also joining us once again. Glad to see you back from being support to his brother in a marathon, and we'll find out about that in a moment. Mark Jones up in Queensland. G'day, Mark. How are you?
Good evening, Brett. Good evening, Peter. How are you both?
I'm all right. Yep.
Mm.
So tell us about that. I saw the news that your brother was out in not just a marathon, an ultra marathon. I actually caught up with a bit of it got a bit of mainstream media coverage as well. Tell us what you were doing, or more particularly what your brother was doing.
Well, what I was doing was just keeping him fed and watered throughout the course of the event. Runs to a racing format called Backyard Masters, where you have to complete a 6.7 kilometer lap within an hour, and then at each hour that 6.7 kilometer loop starts again, and you keep going until there is only one runner left. This particular race started with 54 runners, and the Australian record, the course record was about 40 plus hours. The Australian record was 77, and the world record was 101 laps. And my brother's personal record was 25 hours, and so I went along and just fed. It took my brother Paul about 45 minutes roughly to run around the almost 7K lap. It's 6.7. Sounds like a funny lap. It basically shakes out to 100 miles in 24 hours. That's how it divides up. But yeah, and I was saying that all those records was because
And
my
we
brother
should
again.
point out at this point is that he was actually running. He's not driving a car or
Oh
anything.
yeah, no,
He's
foot
actually
race,
running.
yeah, ultra marathon, yeah, and Paul did 25 hours worth of running, and then he was starting to get a little dizzy. So they took that as a signal to, I've equaled my record on a tougher course. So he was happy with that. But we then had three runners run all the way into day 4. And eventually there was an American, a Kiwi, and an Aussie, and the American dropped out. The Kiwi got to 101 laps and cried enough, and the Aussie went around and completed, by the name of Phil Gore, went around and completed 102nd, a new world record. That shakes out to some ridiculous number like, okay, 6.75 times 100 is 675, obviously. So yeah, it was almost 700 kilometers running in the course of a little bit over 4 days. 4 days and 6 hours that shook out to.
I mean, believe it or not, I used to run myself, but never anything more than 200 metres, and that was long enough. And that was long enough for me. I mean, when they suggested, you're sort of stepping up to the 400, it was like, like hell, no,
Oh,
no, I'm short but sweet. No, to forget about it.
no, they say 400 meters is the worst possible distance for running. It's that bit more than
It
a
is.
sprint, and it's a bit less than a conservative endurance.
Yeah, they always
Like
say the
you.
100-metre sprint is the blue ribbon event at the Olympics and all that, but I'd say it's the 400. The 400 is as you said, it is that test. You can sprint, basically 100. You can sprint full pace for 200. Very very few people can. If you have a look at the splits, very very few people can actually sprint and get sort of even time at 400. It's a very very difficult very very difficult distance to go at, and the people who've done well at it over the years, I have great admiration for them.
Yeah, well, they're still accelerating over 100 meters. Like 200 meters is faster than 100 meters.
Yeah, well, nowadays it's just terrifying to have a look at how fast they're going. I mean, I only did it sort of as a teenager, and sort of like was and didn't really take it seriously. I mean, I had a coach who was very keen for me to take it seriously, but I never took it seriously. I was always far more interested in the standing quarter mile and what cars would do over a standing quarter mile than what I could do over a
Aren't we all?
hundred over 100 metres. I can tell you. And they were considerably faster over a quarter mile than I was over the 100 metres, so they had me covered. Let's chat about. Well, first of all, the parity has reared its ugly head again in supercars. The test up at Winton, the Tickford guys went out and had some new drivers in the car, and apparently it sort of turned into an impromptu parity test. The technical working group from Supercars Australia have announced that they are going to have a look at the situation with the Mustangs after what happened at Hidden Valley. I mean, Mark, you weren't with us last week because you had other things on. And what looking back at Hidden Valley, I mean, what do you think? I mean, is it time to take a serious look at this parity thing with? There were 9 Camaros in the third race of the week. There were 9 Camaros in the top 10. The first 9 cars were Camaros, I think. There's got to be a problem. It can't just be coincidence now. There's obviously a problem somewhere with the Mustangs.
Yeah, it's by the same token, the margins in lap pace are tiny. It's just, I think the Fords just need to qualify a little bit better, and then the problems. Like we saw in race 1, that Cameron Waters had it shot to bits until the car decided that it didn't want to be a race car anymore, to misquote Douglas Adams, and decided it wanted to be a bonfire.
And a
and
very good job it did of it too.
Yeah,
in that situation, sorry, in that situation, it was a control component which was configured that way on all the Mustangs, and they made the change after that race. They changed it. I don't really understand fully. I just know it was a bolt that was too close to something, and they changed the way it was configured. So in that situation, it was a parity. I think you could say it was a parity thing again, because it was a control component that appeared to be only on the Mustangs that caused the fire.
Well, that's 3 Mustangs that have gone up now all of a sudden.
Yeah.
I mean, we had Percat, we had Courtney, and then now Cam Waters, and they've all said that they've been sort of. I think the first 2 were connected, and they think they basically had cured that, but then now sort of the Nick's car has gone up as well. So, Cam's car has gone up as well very suddenly. So there's obviously a problem there. It was a different problem, but it was a problem.
Yes, yeah.
And it hasn't affected the Camaros at all.
No. Yeah.
It's a little bit like how the series was in the mid 2000s, where you had like the Stone Brothers Falcons were just that little bit better than everybody else, and Ambrose and Ingle were winning, almost everything. And we've had phases, so like only a couple of years before that, HRT were untouchable, and that went on for
You,
quite a bit.
you always find that. I think the problem that they're worried about at the moment, and this is the problem of of having manufacturers involved in series and having a parity or balance of performance and that is specific to individual manufacturers is it didn't take long, and Ford are already, Mark Rushbrook in the United States is already sort of, rattling the sabre and saying, well, if we can't start winning, if we're not going to be competitive, we'd be better off out of the series. And of course, supercars would be very, very, very keen for that not to happen.
Yes.
So I imagine that they're going to bend over backwards if necessary to try and make it. To try and cater for them. I think the problem is you mentioned how close the cars are in terms of lap times and in terms of in qualifying and that sort of thing. I think the argument that a lot of the Ford teams are using at the moment is the aerodynamic situation, and not in terms of how fast they're going, but more in what they're doing to the rear tyres, both with the way the engine mapping is set up and also the rear aero on the Mustangs, as they say, look, we're working our tyres a lot harder, our rear tyres a lot harder than the Camaros are, and yes, we're with them, and we're competitive in qualifying, we're competitive in the early stages of the race, but as things go on, by the time we get to the end of our stints, the tyres are pretty much cactus. So I imagine that's
Yeah.
one of the things they're going to be looking at.
And
Yeah.
certainly Dunlop will be completely across that. They'll have all the data for all the race teams, so they can draw a conclusion from what the Mustangs are doing to the Dunlops compared to what the Camaros are doing, and so it's something that will be borne out in the data if that is the case.
Yeah, it's Yes, as Roy's saying, many years back, the AU Falcon had issues with parity, and they had to import the front spoil design that brought them closer to each other aero-wise. That's the problem with parity. I mean, like if you have a look at how they do it in GT3, it's a different thing. A balance of performance is sort of different from parity. Parity is like trying to take different configurations of cars, different engines, different size engines, different configurations, and trying to somehow come up with a set of regulations specific to each car that's going to sort of balance out, which is what they're sort of doing in hypercar with at Le Mans and the World Endurance Championship. It's not like a thing with the GT3 cars where they basically run whatever they like to run, but they're then restricted on terms of things like revs and ride height and a whole bunch of other and weight and a whole bunch of things like that to bring them together. But this isn't quite the same because they want them to be weighing the same. They want them to have the same aerodynamics. They want everything to sort of balance, and it's a difficult balancing act.
Well, yeah, well, and like you said, GT3 is not that much different to how they used to balance the cars in Group C and even in Group A era
Yeah.
uh, with their mid-season homologation updates, and wasn't that a particularly in the Group C days, wasn't that an enjoyable thing to witness every 6 months?
Well, it was enjoyable
But,
for. Let's face it, it was enjoyable for the journalists. I mean, because it gave you something to actually write about. There was always sort of some faux outrage somewhere from one side or the other that filled many a column inch in Australian auto action over the years.
there was some. Go, Peter.
Sorry. I think from a PR standpoint, because the Ford name is still there, it's sort of eased the trauma for diehard Holden fans that a GM product is doing well because of the fact that the Holden name isn't there anymore. So I think it's from a PR standpoint,
The
it's
problem
worked.
is they're running a car that you just can't buy anymore, and
Yeah.
soon you won't be able to buy it even in America. I mean, so I don't know what's going to replace it. Basically, whatever you would think that whatever replaces the Camaro in NASCAR competition is probably what's going to replace the Camaro here eventually. And there's been no sort of word as yet that I've heard as to exactly what that's going to be. So, and then sort of like, is it going to be a car that's going to be suitable for Australian competition just because it's sort of suitable for NASCAR? Will it mean that it's also suitable for what they're trying to do over here with supercars? But either way, we've probably got another probably 3 to 4 years of the Camaro running around, and it's not going to be a case of win on Sunday, buy on Monday, because unless you import one or get ones that's sort of one of the few that came here, or something that's been professionally converted here by one of the companies involved in doing that, you can't buy a Camaro. I've seen very, very few of them on the road. I probably count them on one hand the number of Camaros I've seen on the road, and yet the Mustangs are a dime a dozen. I mean, go down to the car park here at the local shopping centre, and there'll be half a dozen Mustangs almost every time you go down there.
And 2/3 of the Camaros you see are either stretched or stretched versions of yellow Bumblebee Transformers coloured Camaros.
Yeah, well, I actually had one sort of went past me on the freeway the other day, and you notice them when they do, because it's like there's what the hell's that? Oh, it's a Camaro. And I think they're a nice look. I think they're quite a nice looking car, and if you wanted to stand out, you'd be a bit different. You'd have a Camaro, but the General Motors in Australia just don't seem to have been particularly bothered about them at all, and obviously they're winding them back in the States as well. So it just doesn't seem to be a market in terms of what they're looking at, in terms of what General Motors are looking at in the States. They're very much saying, look, our sports car is the Corvette. And that's what's racing, and that's what we're putting our interest into. But you couldn't imagine NASCAR ever allowing a Corvette in to race, no matter what they did with it. So they're going to, if they want to stay in NASCAR, and I'm assuming they do, they're going to have to come up with something suitable to replace the Camaro.
Well, imagine they'll go back to using whatever version of the Mondeo. They've used that before, I think. NASCAR. I can't remember what the Mondeo is called in the US anymore, but I believe, going by faded memory, that prior to the Mustang, that the Ford was the Americanized Mondeo.
Yeah, they had the I think it was the Fusion.
Fusion?
They called
Yeah.
the Fusion that they ran over there for Ford, and then Chevrolet before the Camaro were running the Monte Carlo, I think it was, and then they moved, and there was
they had the SS, the Commodore, basically.
Oh yeah, they did yes, they did. They did bring in that for a while. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, so and that was sort of the downsizing of NASCAR, because once the SS came in and started to run around, they sort of got they sort of went, okay, we're gonna race the sports coupe, and it was a bit like the situation in supercars, where sedans had always been NASCAR was always about sort of family sedans being hotted up and going racing, and so-called stock cars, and then suddenly it was like, okay, they're running the cars that they'd previously run in things like, IMSA GT, and of course the Trans Am series most famously. So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they replace the Camaro with in the years to come, if supercars sort of hang on that long, which I'm assuming they will, but who knows. But anyway, so Roy just saying, do you think that it may be aero related? Are the front spoilers and rear diffusers the exact same? I think I think the front spoilers, I don't think they're exactly the same, but I think they've been designed to have basically the same amount of downforce and the same amount of drag. They've taken a lot of the aero off the front of the cars in particular. If you have a look under the cars now, the the underside of the front split spoiler and the front splitter is flat now. For a while there, it did have sort of a swing under which to encourage some sort of semi-ground effects at the front and the rear and at the rear you had very different aerodynamics. But I think at the moment they've tried to keep. That's the problem. They've tried to basically make everything the same. They've said okay, how much do we shave off this one? I think the Camaros. That was the thing last time they sort of they did the aerodynamic testing, and they ran the Camaros up against the Mustangs. At the end of the day, the Camaros ended up with more downforce because they were looking at why the Mustangs weren't competitive, and they went, well, it's not aero because if you have a look at all the figures, they've actually got the Mustangs actually got a bit more downforce and a little bit less drag, so we're going to have to do something for the Camaro, and so the figures balance up. But what happens on the balance sheet, as it were, and what happens on the tech specs and what happens on track seem to be two totally different things.
Oh, it's 1993 all over again, where the old the VP Commodores just weren't developing as much downforce as the EB Falcons of the time, and there was a mid-season change, and like going into Bathurst after the advantages that Ford had had. Yeah, it's a story that we have heard before, and we'll probably hear again.
And the same with manufacturers saying, well, if things don't change, I'm going home. So it's cyclical. It happens every time there's a change in the category.
Well, I see. It was interesting that there was. I didn't know that there was any threat at all, but some people were surprised when General Motors made the announcement that yes, we will be back. Cadillac will be back at Le Mans next year. Now I thought it was a long-term commitment, but apparently it wasn't. And they said, yes, we were very happy with the way it went at Le Mans, and as a result, we're going to come back next year. Whereas apparently it was an option that if things hadn't have gone as well as they did, they might have said, "Nah, we'll give that away and we'll just stick with IMSA and just wait there." So yeah, that was interesting.
And Acura didn't go to Le Mans. They stayed with IMSA, and BMW are building up at the same token. They didn't do Le Mans this year. But with the intention that they would do Le Mans next year. And now, of course, they do have a win in IMSA. Have we shifted to IMSA properly?
Well, we might as well, because it was one of the few things that actually happened, apart from MotoGP. I was out at the Oakley Kart Club on Sunday. That's what you'll see this week on In Pit Lane. It was headed out to the club day at the Oakley Kart Club at Clayton. Absolutely freezing day. Anybody who knows me knows that I don't have warm sort of cold weather clothes, because I'm never cold. I'm in t-shirts and all year, t-shirts, shorts, whatever, not a problem. But boy, oh boy, I was glad I had some extra clothes in the back of the car to wrap myself in, because I've never been so cold in all my life. It was absolutely vicious, the wind there, and Roy, who's with us as well, was at Todd Road over the other side of me, and said that it was just as bad there. So, but so I didn't see a lot. I caught up with sort of the start of the Watkins Glen 6 hour. But what happened, for those who haven't caught up on the fact, the Penske team Porsche went across the line first. Jaminet and was Nick Tandy? Nick Tandy went across the line.
Felipe Nasser is Matt Campbell's co-driver.
Yeah, and then they went across the line. They went across the line first, and got all of sprayed the champagne and waved the trophies in the air, and then, not long afterwards, they said, "Excuse me, sir, could we have those trophies back?" Because they failed the post-race tech inspection because of the wear and tear on the wooden plank underneath and the ride height. So, and people who were at the track and who were watching said, yeah, those Porsches seem to be running very, very low, certainly in terms of, the sparks and the things that they were throwing up at various points around the track.
Yeah, well, they're
Everyone's,
titanium these days, yeah.
yeah,
Rather than
so they were very, very, very low, and apparently they've worn out too. Now Penske have announced that they will appeal the result of the race, but it did give, as you say, BMW its first win because they were about the. So now we've had Acura has won, and I think has Cadillac won a race in. I think they've won one, haven't they?
uh, yes, I'm fairly sure that they have.
Yeah, I
I
think
had it
they.
in my head that they won Daytona, but they didn't. It was Acura who got the win at Daytona.
So
Um,
certainly Acura have won, which is the American sort of Honda, the luxury brand, the American luxury brand
I think
for
it was
Honda.
Sebring. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
Cadillac
I
got
think
a
you're right.
Sebring,
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
pretty sure. So I think of all of the major players in GTP as they call it, or LMDH, we've now had a win for all of the major players, and as you say, I mean it wasn't. It wasn't, like they didn't cross the line first, but I mean they were still there at the end, and they were obviously competitive. So congratulations for what it's worth to BMW, and they're now two of their cars are now in Europe with Team WRT, and they are being tested as we speak for a tilt at the World Endurance Championship next year. So sports car racing is. Whether it's GT3 or hypercar or LMDH or any of those things, it's sports car racing is just absolutely on fire at the moment.
Oh, it seems such a shame that we're. Oh, it seems a shame that we're losing GTE, but yeah, the manufacturers have lost interest in GTE. So yeah, that's
Yeah, I can
But
see it
even
from
so,
their
we have.
point. I can see it from their point of view. I mean, there were only the handful of manufacturers interested in it. Now, for next year, I mean, for the World Endurance Championship, we're assuming we're going to see, apart from all the players in GTE have GT3 spec cars. Plus, you're going to introduce Audi, Mercedes, Ford with the new Mustang, other cars, Honda with the NSX. There's a few cars out there that are going to sort of
Lexus.
possibly pop up. Lexus have got a car which runs in IMSA as well, and they could be homologated. You can even look at Nissan running
Lamborghini.
around in GT300, so they've got a car that's capable of being homologated for GT3 as well.
Yeah, it's a bit long in the tooth now, the old Nissan GDR, so they'll be looking for some kind of an update there. We already have the new Nissan Z as a GT4 homologation. So Nissan have a GT4 now, which they hadn't had previously, but by the same token, Nissan and Renault swap around a little bit. Like Nissan have taken over the Renault Formula E team, so they're just swapping the badges around there. But yeah, the GT3 certainly quite a bit to come. Lamborghini is arriving, and also they're arriving at the pointy end as well in hypercar. So there's stuff going on there.
Yeah, we haven't seen the car. We saw the debut of the Alpine, what the Alpine's going to look like, but we haven't seen. I thought that they would. I thought Lamborghini would have some sort of display or some sort of unveiling at Le Mans, which is because Friday's the big day for all of that stuff, and of course Ford were there with the Mustang and Alpine. So they might have said, okay, we'll just stay, we'll just hang back, and they might be waiting for the next round even at Monza in a
Well,
couple of weeks'
home
time
territory.
to sort of to make the announcement there in sort of home territory, and also to upset Ferrari's apple cart. But I believe I heard on the other day from Graham Goodwood on This Week in Sports Car with Marshall Pruitt that they've already sold about 80,000 tickets to the round at Monza, the 6 hours at Monza. So Ferrari winning at Le Mans has certainly done no harm for sports car racing in Italy, that's for sure, because it's like, Formula One, who cares about Formula One? We won Le Mans!
And there's and it's this weekend's the Spa 24 hour as well for the GT3 nuts. So
Yeah, and there's quite a few Aussies over there. The Groves are over there. Anton De Pasquale's going to run there. We've got Chaz Mostert is running with Kenny Habbull's Sun Energy Mercedes team. I think our mate Ricky Capo is over there as well. I know that when he was on the show earlier this year, that Ricky said the intention was that he would be at Spa with his team running the Lamborghini. So he's
Jordan
over
Love's
there.
going to be in the Porsche, I imagine, as well.
Yeah, so there's going to be a few Aussies. The good news about it is, if you want to have a look on the weekend, the whole of the Spa 24 hours is going to be on YouTube. So there's you don't have to make any special arrangements to get dodgy feeds or play the games with fake addresses and all that, which I don't. Nobody would do that, of course, to get free access to stand for Le Mans. I mean, I'm sure that would never, ever happen, and I wouldn't encourage anybody to do it. But it can be done. Trust me. So,
The entry
yeah.
list is ridiculous as well. It's over 70 GT3s for the Spa 24 hour. It's one of the most gorgeous sights in motorsport to watch that flood of GT3s going through Eau Rouge on lap one.
And they'll probably be doing it in the rain. The forecast is, once again, surprise, surprise, it's Spa, and the forecast is wet. So, yeah, it will be fun. There's no doubt about it. It will be. There'll be fun and games. Will be fun and games. Incidentally, for people watching in Melbourne on Channel 31 this tomorrow night at 9 o'clock on In Pit Lane, we've also got an interview with Ken, the full interview with Ken Begg from the GT4 Australia series to talk about what's happening with GT4, including the new long distance race that they're going to have specifically for GT4s at Bathurst at the end of next year. So that's tomorrow night on the program. So that's going to be interesting as well.
Carl's come a very long way in a very short time in motorsport. It seems like only 6 or 7 years ago that he had a highly modified BMW E30 running around in the Queensland Touring Car Championship Series, and now he's running up at the pointy end with that beautiful Mercedes AMG GT4 that he's racing. He had Paul Morris co-driving with him, I think, last weekend. One of the Morrises, but
yeah, I think it was Nash. I think it was Nash actually. I think Nash.
Yeah, Nash
and
was
it's
with
the trip.
Carl, and Paul was driving with might have been with Tony Quinn. Actually, I think it was the other way around. Nash was with
Might
Tony
have been,
Quinn.
yeah. Either way, I mean, now that Tony's involved as well, I mean, you got some serious money there because, as I said in the interview, and I've said a few times, when Stefan Rattel was out here sort of last year, and I interviewed him at Phillip Island, that's one of the things that I said, look, I'm really surprised that GT4 hasn't taken off in Australia to the same extent it has around the rest of the world. And he said, look, he said, he said, personally, I don't understand it either. He said, it just seems to be the ideal sort of place for the amateur driver to get involved and still have a very quick car. And if you have a look at the cars, I mean, if you have a look at the story tomorrow night, we have a look at that bit of a look at the AMG Mercedes that Ken was driving. And it's hard to tell the difference between it and the GT3 car. It's a very, very sophisticated race car. They put on some great racing. He's got he's basically leased that from Triple Eight at the moment. It's a Triple Eight prepared car, and he's got coming out or has recently arrived. He's got a new BMW on the way. So
that makes sense.
So we've got more cars happening, coming around and on the way. So yeah.
Well, most of Carl's racing history has been in BMWs. So yeah, he of course he had that V8 Mercedes-Benz C63, which is passed on to Anthony Levitt now in the Australian production car series, and always looks spectacular, whether it was Begg or Levitt driving that car, and with a gorgeous sound, that magnificent 6-litre Mercedes V8. Yeah, but most of them Beggs racing has been with those with BMWs, and either it started in an E30, moved to an E36, had the E90 V8, which the E90 V8 seemed to be just a little bit problematic. It didn't quite work as well as everybody hoped as either a production car but there's still quite a few of them about in production car racing, and yeah, um, and
There's
yeah.
a couple actually down here, like that are very heavily modified, that are running in sort of club level racing. There's an absolutely beautiful Mercedes running around, a silver thing. It looks like a DTM car, but apparently it's just a modified sort of a heavily modified road car that runs around in club racing here in
Awesome.
Victoria. And I don't know whether it'll be down at. I'm hoping might be down for the 6 hour regularity, the relay race that happens at the end of next month at Phillip Island. Because you talk about sort of, they've got, I think it's 50. You talk about car numbers. They've got 50. They've got 50 teams entered. They're 4 car teams. So they've got 200 cars entered for that relay on the weekend, for the 6 hour relay, and you get all sorts of weird and wonderful things turning up to that, from sort of backyard specials all the way through to sort of like pensioned off GT3 machines from the early parts of the 2000s. So that's coming up in a few weeks' time. Mark? What's the health of the state series like up in Queensland now? Because it was always sort of pretty healthy, but we obviously don't hear much about it down here. What's it looking like up there?
Well, see, I don't get over to because of the long running split we've had in Queensland between Motorsport Australia and Queensland Raceway. There was a situation that the all of the Motorsport Australia State Championship occurred at Morgan Park and didn't venture up to Brisbane anymore. But now with the change of ownership at Queensland Raceway, things are changing in that regard. So some categories that I didn't get to see as often as I used to, I'm getting to see more often now. There's getting the same some problems with numbers in the categories that like cars that categories that ebb and flow, like say Formula Ford, for example. Numbers float around. Some years they're good, some years they're not. Improved production is always magnificent. With production cars has turned into off the back of the work of people like Begg and Jerry Murphy. Production sports has wandered around a bit. Of course, their numbers are always fluctuate around a bit. And separate to that, there's production sports cars has a separate series here in Queensland. Well, not so much a separate series, but basically the MX-5s and Toyota 86 and Toyota 86's clones run their own races without the rest of production sports, because that's one way to get the cup cars and the GT3s away from the smaller sports cars, which has always been an issue, particularly down your way, of course, where the Victorian Sports Car Series is almost completely old GT3s and some Carrera Cups, and then New South Wales is different again with
And they've moved off down here. I mean, sort of Dave would know if he's not here with us this week, but he was sort of heavily involved in that, because both he and Michael compete with the Mustang in the Victorian Sports Car Championship, and they've now moved away completely from the Victorian State Championship and are running at all sorts of. I mean, their most recent round was over at the Bend, because they really wanted longer races. They wanted more track time. They weren't interested in the format that they were basically running, the sort of the 2 short races and a long feature race on Sunday afternoon. Basically, they wanted more practice time. They wanted more qualifying time, and they wanted at least a 1 hour race on the Sunday, which unfortunately, it was very, very difficult for the state series to to fit them in on under those circumstances here because it's a packed program. It's overcrowded as it is. I mean, if you have a look at the state series, you're looking at they were 11 and 12 categories running around, and they all wanted their own races, and they all wanted different lengths and different times, and it was a very hard juggling act. And in the end, sports cars just said, no, we'll go elsewhere and we'll find other ways of doing it. So they're running it like some of the Pie Arc club events and things like the Bend, and I think they've got a roundup at Winton coming up as well. So yeah, it's different, but it seems that having a look around, it seems that state racing is. After all of the chaos of the last couple of years, it seems to be recovering quite well, although numbers are down here. Sports sedans down here have really fallen off. I mean, you used to get 26, 27, up to 30 cars in sports sedans here, and I think at the last round there was something like 12 cars running around, and a lot of the faster cars are just not coming out. They're saving, and they're saving everything up for the Phillip Island 50k plate, which is the big. That's the big race down here for the locals, and a lot of them that I've spoken to have said, "Look, we just can't afford to run around, doing 5 rounds around. We'll pick out 1 or 2 rounds and basically focus. Our focus is going to be on the 50k plate at Island Magic."
Yeah, well, certainly here in Queensland with sports sedans, there's always been a performance gulf between those cars that run the national series and those that run the state series. That the lap times got for a little bit quite significantly different between them, and so the sports sedans got a bit separated that way, but that's changed in more recent times, and there's been some fresh blood coming through, and some of the a couple of new cars built. Sports sedans is actually not in one of the better health, and of course the opening round of the National Sports Sedan Series was won by a Queensland car, so yay. And a long time coming for the MR Automotive team for a round win.
Yes, if you can keep your head while all around losing theirs, you'll be the tallest person in the room, and that's what basically happened. I mean, you had Tony Ricciardello he made his return and had some problems, and you had Jordan Caruso had some problems with John Goulet's Audi, and then in the end the car from Queensland was just it was consistent and was there at all the right times and picked up the lion's share of the purse.
Yeah, Ash Jarvis in the Smith family run Monaro, the Monaro that Colin Smith took to runners up in the championship a few years back, and Ash Jarvis drives the car now, and Ash is the former national TA2 series champion, and he got up for a win at the opening round, and
I will get your comment on this one, Mark. This is from Mark Russell. Queensland's more confused than a termite and a wooden yo-yo.
Yeah, well, that's been a fact. That's been from the split between Motorsport Australia and the categories that have run out of Queensland Raceway. They've basically the two circuits, with Lakeside being a part of Queensland Raceway up until the ownership change. They were two completely different sets of categories, ran the two different circuits. Some wandered back and forth, and some didn't. So it's been,
so what sort of having a look at Queensland Raceway. I mean, what sort of we've heard about the toilets. We know the toilets are apparently very, very good because Tony is very, very keen about his toilets and having good clean toilets. We need to send him on a mercy mission to Le Mans and have a talk to the ACO because. Because if you've been to the toilets at Le Mans, it's part of the experience, but it's not a particularly pleasant one. But
Um,
what work has he done out there? I mean, have you noticed when you've been out there a really big difference?
oh, it's an enormous difference. Uh, there's been entire new buildings. Uh, Around three quarters of the old garages, the old shed style garages, have been built over with concrete, and we now have a corporate box, like the from where the control tower heads towards pit exit is now a corporate box area, not dissimilar to Eastern Creek in its layout. The And towards the pit inside, it's all been concreted over, so we now have a spectator area that you can stand on top of the pits and look out, like Phillip Island's for example, and that's to the pit building. So as as you say, the toilets. I mean, that was the first thing that was done when Quinny took over the
Yes, we
place.
know.
Yeah, the cafe has been redeveloped, and it's a substantially different place now. It's substantially different menu, and of course we've got a new piece of racetrack where we've now got a link road that connects the what we call the Hanger Straight that runs from turn 4 to turn 5, and connects to the Lake Straight, which runs from turn 3 to turn 4. So there is now a fifth circuit variation because of that, which is called the Switchback. It was put to a poll, run on the Speed Cafe website, and Switchback was the selected name. And now you run on the Clubman circuit, which turns right just after turn 2 down into that dipper, and then links back up to turn 4, cutting out the long run to and from turn 3. And then you go through turns 4 and 5, the two left-handers on the circuit, and then suddenly you've got this new left-hander halfway down the Hanger Straight, which then puts you back over to the other straight, and runs you up towards the end of this, running towards turn 3, in the opposite direction that you normally would race on, and then through the crossover and the end of the lap actually looks quite like Calder, the end of the Calder lap, where you have a right, a left, a right, a left, and swinging, and a long right to switch back onto the Dick Johnson Straight. So that extra circuit variation, it's one of the one of the big things about Queensland Raceway with those four long straights on it. It's always been a horsepower circuit. It's like Sandown. If you've got big horsepower, then yeah, there you go. Sandown's yours. But with this new switchback variation, the long straights are basically non-existent, and it becomes much more of a handling circuit, and it's taken them quite a bit to figure out. Actually, the competitors, some are on it straight away, but a lot of them, it's an interesting like the novelty hasn't worn off yet of a new circuit variation, and everyone's just loving the bigger, like there's an excitement about the place.
It's good
And
to see. I mean, it's good to see Tony getting, because I mean he spent so much money and so much energy over in New Zealand, in
three
his involvement
racetracks.
over there. Yeah, not one but three racetracks. I mean, he said, I enjoy it, and he really likes it. I mean, it's obviously, when I've spoken to him about the situation before, this was before he bought QR, was. He was just saying that he really loved the sort of the can-do attitude over there, and I haven't been. I've been to Hampton Downs. I haven't been to Torpower or to
Well,
Highlands. Highland looks amazing, at least from from a photograph. But apparently it's got some issues in terms of
middle
some
of nowhere,
safety.
really.
But it's a fabulous. So they've got a couple of really good tracks over there although they're all in the North Island, which I know annoys a lot of the people, obviously on the South Island. But but yeah, so it's good to see him sort of investing in that. Formula One coming up. We're going to with the Red Bull Ring
Austria.
on the weekend. I mean, Pete, can Nick is this potentially Nick De Vries's last race?
I don't think so. I don't. I was reading an article. I know in GP magazine, um, and the new Dietrich Mateschitz. Okay, sorry if I can't pronounce
I
his
don't
name
know.
properly. Um, isn't really that interested in motorsport, and I think he's ultimately. I think the whole of AlphaTauri is under pressure because I think he's looking to offload AlphaTauri. Um,
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I know Helmut Marko is talking it up. Now, apparently there was something when Dietrich died, there was something in the will or something which basically sort of kept the race teams around in perpetuity. But yeah, that's what I've heard is that they are the people who are now in charge at Red Bull are far more interested in doing what the business was set up for, and that is selling soft drinks rather than becoming sort of an automotive juggernaut with with cars in Formula One. But there's certainly there's plenty of talk out there about De Vries. I mean, obviously some people are saying, well, could he be replaced by Daniel Ricciardo, which I think
no, I
would be
don't think that'll
crazy.
happen.
Don't think that'll happen as well. So they've got Liam Lawson is sitting there
Yeah,
in the
I
wings,
think it,
and now they're also talking about just today they're in America they're starting to play up or talk up the Alex Palou as being a possibility for it, if not this year, for certainly next year. In fact, Alex has come out today and said, he doesn't feel that what he's doing in IndyCar is having any effect on what his plans are for the future. He said whether that's staying in IndyCar or trying to get into Formula One, he just says basically that he sort of knows where he's sort of hinting that he knows where he's going, but he can't tell anybody else where that might be. And the rumours are going around that it could be to AlphaTauri to replace Nick De Vries.
yeah. I certainly don't think it'll happen this year. I think they'll let him go this year, and then maybe look at yeah.
I see also Gerhard Berger is putting Gerhard Berger as in every respect trying to be the new Nicky Lauda or the new Sir Jackie Stewart in terms of making outrageous statements, but he's popped up and said that Red Bull have got the ideal solution to the problem with the consistency problem of Sergio Perez, and his name is Danny Ricciardo, and they should just drop him in there now. So
Yeah.
I
I
can't see
mean,
that happening either.
no, because they'd have to pay out a contract, which I don't think they want to do, especially as we said, the new regime at Red Bull. I don't think they would be favourable to paying out someone's contract. I think that rather let it run and then do things. Um, but I think Daniel's a good driver, but I think it's replacing someone who's older with someone who's older, and I don't think that's a good idea. And I don't
Yeah,
think
I don't think they because I mean, if you have a look at Toro Rosso, the way it was sort of set up, or AlphaTauri was set up, it was more to bring through those young drivers from the Red Bull development series, and basically give them a start out and basically audition them for the main game. And I think that it would defeat the purpose if they put Danny Rick back into that car. One, he's not going to be it's not going to be instantly competitive. And number two, it really defeats the purpose. You'd be much better off if you're going to make a change. I think they'd be much better off dragging Liam Lawson out of the Super Formula in Japan and putting him into a Formula One car because I can't see him doing any worse than De Vries is doing at the moment.
and I also think that while you've got Max Verstappen there, you've got a Dutch driver in a sort of a Germanic team with Helmut Marko there. I think for an Australian, that's a poison chalice, as we've seen with Mark Webber and others. It's a poison chalice.
Yeah, well, there was always that thing that Helmut Marko in particular, and I know from people who actually worked at Red Bull. I mean, we had sort of a couple of insiders there for a while, who just sort of said that basically that Helmut was never a big fan of Australian drivers. He was not a big fan of Marks. He was not a big fan of Daniels. He didn't like the whole casual attitude and the good. He liked that focused, hard, win at all cost. Right, this is very serious, and it's I'm going to take it very seriously. I'm going to focus 100% on winning, and nothing's going to get in my way. And that was his sort of, his attitude. And that's why he always preferred, first of all, Vettel and now Verstappen, because they are very much, they were very much in that focus thing. It's like, we are here to win, and we will do whatever it takes within reason to win. Whereas, Daniel was sort of, like, obviously I want to win, but, I'm also having a good time as well. I mean, I'm driving Formula One, for God's sake, getting paid shitloads of money. I mean, things are, life is good.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that's coming up on the weekend, so we'll have that to have a look at. Doc's not here, so we'll get there. I didn't actually see, did either of you guys see MotoGP at all?
No, Assen always. I never remember that Assen's a Saturday race.
I know it's Sunday now.
Oh,
they've changed it. Yeah, they changed it. They changed it about a year or two ago. Because it always was. It was always the Saturday race. But now the rules, the laws have changed over there now, and they're allowed to run it on the. They're allowed to run it on the Sunday, but apparently a good race. Once again, the Ducati's dominating, although Brad Binder did a great job in the KTM. Yet again, unfortunately, Jack Miller came off, so he's having a bad run as well. There's not just Marc Marquez who's throwing the toys away all the time. Jack's having a problem as well. But there was some. I think it was Brad got hit by track limits on the last lap and was sent back down the field a bit. So it was once again total domination by Ducati. They're just in front at the moment, and MotoGP are also talking about whether they can do their own parity thing to try and keep the Japanese manufacturers interested, because at the moment both Yamaha and Honda are starting to make noises of their own, saying, we don't know whether it's worth sort of hanging around here anymore, because we're not in the same class as the Ducatis, and we're now being we're now being beaten by sewing machine manufacturers and God knows what from KTM and Aprilia and all that sort. So we might not be interested anymore. We might just stick to superbikes if we do anything at all there. So the MotoGP Dorna are saying that they might take a look at some stage later in the year that they will have a technical review and see what, if anything, can be done to close up the field and make things a bit more competitive for the Japanese series, because it just seems so strange to watch MotoGP racing and you don't see Japanese manufacturers up the front. It's a bit crazy.
Yeah, it's surreal. No, it's.
But
It's...
But anyway, so that's just about all we've got time for. I think we've done a good job, guys. We've covered the hour, and thank you to those people who have joined us. I think we're down a few tonight, not just with panel, but also with viewers as well, because probably they're doing what I will be doing in a second, which is watching the cricket. And Australia are at this stage done for 39, so it's a good start. They were put into bat by the Englishmen, and it doesn't seem to have, so far after the first hour of play, it doesn't seem to have gone exactly according to plan for them. So Dave Warner is still there. And yes, if they can, I imagine if Australia can get a good total up, they've got the opportunity that England will be batting last on a wicket that might take a bit of turn, and we've got the only full-time spinner playing in the game, because the Poms went in with. Yeah, I mean, well, they've got no one. I mean, they brought in this kid, the little leg spinner from England, who Warney had a lot of time for. He said, look, he said, this kid, he said years ago, he said, this kid should be playing now, but he said, he said, should be bringing it through. But he said, right, he said, they're not doing it. I mean, they brought him into the squad, but I thought, well, what's the point of bringing him into the squad and then not playing? But they saw a bit of a green tinge and they went, So as someone said, they've sort of lost their nerve with Bazball already and sort of gone, oh no, we might go back to doing what we do best, and that is, seaming green tops and line and length and hoping the ball moves around a bit. But obviously so far it hasn't happened. So anyway, historic racing reporter wanted. Yeah, well, the only historic racing coming up is the Festival Speed up at Winton, and also coming up in a later date in November. The Baskerville Historic is on, and talking to the guys down at Baskerville, we can the historic sports sedans will be they've got a really good turnout of historic sports sedans, which will be great, including the replica of Brian Thompson's Volkswagen Chev that has been entered, and we'll be out there, and to see that running around Baskerville will be something very special. In Pit Lane will be down at Baskerville. That has been confirmed. We went down last year, thanks to the historic Baskerville organising committee, and we're going down again this year to cover it as well. So we'll be down there probably for the 3 days, hopefully to do a little bit of live streaming, but also just from the pits and that sort of thing, but also for a special edition of In Pit Lane later on in the year. Also, we'll be going up to Winton for the Festival of Speed as well. So eventually we'll have some stuff coming back. Now, just quickly before we go, to let you know, not sure what's going to be happening over the next few weeks with Full Course Yellow, and even for In Pit Lane for that matter, because as I sort of mentioned a couple of times, I'm starting next week. I'm starting a gig which is going to last for about 5 to 6 weeks, which will take me out of play on basically every night. So that's where Doc is. He's doing the same gig at the moment. So he's currently running around the botanical gardens of Melbourne in the freezing cold and the rain, sort of telling people to move along as they look at flashing lights or something. But anyway, that's what I'll be doing next week. So if you go into Lightscape at the Botanical Gardens and you hear someone with a loudspeaker who sounds a bit like me or Doc, it probably is. So say hi. But we'll see what happens in the next week. If Pete and the other guys want to keep going, we'll do that. Just stay with the In Pit Lane Facebook page. That's probably the place to get all your latest news about that. But Mark, thanks for joining us again. Really appreciated catching up and getting the news from Queensland. It takes away our sort of Victorian, our Melbourne centricity a little bit. So thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks very much, Brett and Peter, and I'll throw in a little bit of historics there because we're not that far away from historic Queensland in mid-July. So and there's some gorgeous bits of gear being.
I saw someone. I saw one of them might be actually Bap Romano's Khadija.
I don't know if that's going to be because Bap still brings the car out for a run just for his own personal fun from time to time. He's never he doesn't race it, but he brings it out for a bit of some fast lappery around the places. So that would be, if the car's coming out for the historics, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, if Bap's out there watching, Bap, take it down to Baskerville. Take it down. It would look very, very good running around Baskerville. I'm sure they'd give you some. And speaking of which, speaking of Baskerville, also, I don't know whether can I announce this or not. I don't know whether I think it's been announced publicly. But John Bower will be the patron of the historic Baskerville this year, and at the moment they're trying to get a lot of his older cars together and back down in Tasmania to do some special stuff down there. So Bowie will be down there as the patron, and Joe Collegia is taking 3 cars down there, the Corvette, the Mustang, and also the good news is the March, the sports car that Joe basically sold off to America. He's now bought back again. So
Ah,
So yes, yeah. So that's going to be down there, as well as his brand new Lamborghini and all the other toys he's got. But the March, I know that Bowie in particular absolutely adored that little car, the sports car, and that will be down at Baskerville as well, along with, as I said, Tomo's Volkswagen and Tomo's Mercedes, which of course John originally drove. So it's another ex-John Bower car. So yeah, lots to do. Okay, everybody. We will see. We will see everybody when we see. Stay tuned for In Pit Lane. Might be a few repeats or something coming up. Trying to work on a few things. It's very hard at the moment to find time to get out and film stuff on location because, as I said, working sort of like most days of the week at the moment. So it's a bit difficult. But anyway, we will see you. We'll see you when we see you. Thanks for joining us, and until we see you next time on Full Course Yellow or In Pit Lane, thanks for joining us. Bye, everybody.
See you.